Good morning, watch nerds. Firstly, I should point out that this video is totally unsponsored, and you'll be pleased to know it's quite short as well. I reached out to San Martin some time ago to see if they were interested in supplying me watches so I could review them, but because my subscribership wasn't high enough, they declined my offer. San Martin was founded back in 2016 by Liao Ziming. I hope I pronounced that correctly, but I don't think I have, and it's a Hong Kong based company. Now, although a recent business, they were still one of the first new generation Chinese based watch companies. Now, there is some argument whether or not they're a micro brand or a mushroom brand. I certainly don't consider them a mushroom brand, but they now have quite a large catalogue of watches, and they're quite a big player in the watch industry, although not familiar to the average person in the street. And for those of you interested, on this rather cold and frosty day, here's my watch of the day. It's the Yema Flygraph. So why am I actually making this video? Well, firstly, it's too cold to play golf today, and secondly, I haven't got much else to do. No, seriously, I believe this brand is at the top of the tree when it comes to well-made, well-spec'd Chinese watches. I can hear some people say, but all they make is homages and copy designs of other manufacturers. Well, indeed, they make plenty of those because there's a massive market for them. But they also make some watches that have their own design. And will also produce some watches where they put their own slant on some very old designs. This vintage diver is one of those watches. Now, it takes inspiration from a very old watch, but the size is different, and the watch in question was never actually made in that colour. In actual fact, the only watch I own that is a direct homage is the Ixindao and IPOS 5303, not a San Martin. However, in time gone by, I have owned a few San Martin direct homages, and my first one was a 62 mass lookalike. At the time, the watch had to be ordered directly from San Martin, and the owner sent a picture of the watch before he dispatched it. Now, with the volume of watches now sold these days, those days are long gone. When it arrived, I was knocked off my feet by the build quality. Regrettably, the bezel action was quite poor, and ended up thinking the 42mm case was too large for my 17cm wrist, so it got flipped. Since then, I've owned and sold a fair few San Martin watches, but I will now only buy the unique designs or distant homage models. Now I'm going to briefly take you through the three that I own. First up is the vintage diver I showed you a minute ago, a watch San Martin was very successful with. In actual fact, this won my bezel wars. It's a 38mm watch that's also quite slim. The most common colour was black. But I managed to get hold of this good used burnt orange one for about £160. You'll notice that it's got this lovely riveted bracelet, and as usual with San Martin, it's got a milled clasp. It's got solid end links, and unusually it's got an Orient YM55 movement inside it, which I actually prefer to the NH35 because the positional variance tends to be a little bit better. It took a little while for me to bond with this watch, but now I absolutely love it. Second up is this lovely vintage style pilot's watch. It's vaguely similar to a Longines Heritage, but far from a direct homage. It's got this lovely patina dial with raised indices, which are actually made of black loom. I particularly like the blued hands. Now this is a 38.5mm watch, and like all San Martin watches, the dial and case finishing is ridiculously good. For reference, this isn't actually the original strap, but believe me, the original one is very good, albeit a lot lighter in colour. Inside is the good old NH35 automatic movement from Seiko. Believe it or not, I picked this mint condition one up for about £100. Although new, they're still only about 150. Finally is my favourite out of the three, and this watch is amazing. Although it's got a black waffle dial, it isn't really homaging anything, and I think it can be considered a unique design. From the sapphire crystal to the amazing and complex finished case, this watch oozes quality. And if this came out of Switzerland or Japan, it would cost you a small fortune. I think my favourite part of this watch is this bracelet, which is a cross between an engineer and a beads of rice. It's even got an on-the-fly adjustable clasp. Now this is the SN0131G, and it's got a 39.5mm case, although it does wear a tad smaller. Now I only paid £180 for this very good used one. Well, in actual fact it'd only be used for a video. Although brand new, they aren't that much more than £200. Like the other two I've showed you, it really does represent incredible value for money. There are many other very good brands coming out of China, such as Chronos or Proxima. Although I believe San Martin still do it a little bit better, I think Ixtal may well challenge them soon, but it's early days for them at the moment. A tier down and you can spend even less money and pick up brands such as Adid's Dive, Steel Dive and Tendoria, but don't expect them to be quite as good. Of course, we shouldn't forget the many micro brands of great quality that also come out of China, but I covered that in a recent video, which was my tribute to the Chinese watch industry. Now, as good as these watches are, San Martin have let themselves down in a major respect, and that's part of their branding. Have a look at the logos on these three watches, and you may notice they're all different. In actual fact, I believe they've got a few others as well, and sometimes they aren't even consistent on the same watch, with one logo on the dial, one on the clasp and another on the crown. I think it's time they just found one they really liked, used it on all their watches, and then stick with it. I would also suggest they consider a totally different name for their own designs as well. So in brief, I'm paying tribute to what I consider a great brand that produces not only good quality homages, but are starting to make some really nice watches of their own design. To be honest, I'm not convinced that at some stage you won't start seeing them in high street shops, but who knows. Now that brings me to the end of this review, but I would love to know what you think about San Martin watches in the comments column below. I would also love you to click on the like button, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Lastly, and most importantly, please enjoy the rest of your day.